And a lot of times we want to be like, oh, I sneezed wrong, or I did this weird thing wrong, and the whole Jenga tower came down. But maybe that sneeze was just like the final blow to like shift it all. And that is not that you sneezed wrong. It's just that all those foundational things were missing.
Hey guys, it's Cori from Redefining Strength. Welcome to this episode of the Fitness Hacks podcast. So today I'm going to cover 5 tips to help you move well to your final day on this planet. In this episode, we're going to cover how to stop demonizing moves, why there are no bad exercises. I'm then going to share an interview I did with Dr. Jen Hosler, a physical therapist and mobility specialist. She's going to talk about why our body is like Jenga and how we can retrain movement patterns after injury. I'm then going to share 8 key vitamins and minerals to help with muscle growth and recovery. I want to dive into this very easy way to improve your form and make sure your recruitment patterns are correct. It might not be what you think it is. And then I want to talk about imbalances and why they might be worse than inflexibility and what you can do to correct them. So let's jump right in. So I want to talk about bad exercises, the demonization of movements. I see this a lot on social media. Everybody is arguing this exercise is bad, or no, this exercise is going to cause you to fall apart instantly. I have to admit, guys, I do not agree with any of that, okay? I believe that there are no bad exercises. Dun, dun, dun. I know some of you are like, no, this exercise is bad, or that exercise is weird. Okay, the more we can see opportunity in movements, the better off we're going to be. Because if you were to actually film a lot of the movements you do in everyday life as an exercise, you'd be like, whoa, that's pretty weird, right? We're twisting, we're turning, we're reaching, we're doing all these different things in awkward positions a lot in everyday life. And I'm not telling you to go into the gym and do those moves with weights or any of that. But I do want you to, instead of writing off moves, see the value in them and also learn how you can learn to control movement patterns you might have been afraid of in the past. Because so often I hear people say, I won't do deadlifts, they hurt my back, I won't squat because of knee pain, and all these different fundamental movement patterns that we actually need to do in everyday life. Unless you're not squatting down to the toilet, unless you're not hinging over to pick up a box off the ground, you're doing these exercises, and the gym is the perfect place to really learn to control them. Plus, like if you start to fall victim to some of the demonization, you're going to fall into camps, which is going to make you write off some very valuable stuff, especially very valuable stuff for you. Like just taking even the overhead kettlebell swing. I don't personally use this. I don't teach it to clients. I am not experienced in it, so I don't want to coach it. I don't think that the risk is worth the reward personally and for the clientele that I work with. However, there are camps that love this movement, and I can even argue, as I say, that I won't use it for the value of it. And I love that I can argue for the value of it in certain situations, because I think that allows me to be open to so much opportunity with movements to meet people where they're at, and even to meet myself where I'm at as my needs and goals change. So just recognize that it's not only like the movement, but also the variations that you can come up with, right? No, one exercise is not right for everybody, but it doesn't make it a bad exercise, A. And B, a lot of times there's a variation of it that we can do that will meet us where we're at. And if we just write it off, we won't ever find it. So in thinking about how much people just say moves are bad, moves are evil, I wanted to give you a way to give yourself perspective if you do have this feeling towards certain exercises. Because I think so often if we've gotten an injury from something, we have fear with it, or we've used it improperly. So there's been improper implementation, which then creates the this move is bad thing over the fact that the movement is actually bad, right? It's how we've used it improperly. Potentially that's caused the injury or issue, and now the fear and the writing of the move off. So if you've been labeling it as bad, I want you to start to assess some of these things, even when you hear other people saying this, okay? So 1, consider why you believe this. Was it due to an injury yourself, or was it even something you read? It is very natural to want to label a move as bad or good because you got injured during it. But I can tell you, I got injured during the deadlift, and had I written that off, I would have missed out on an amazing move, which I can now deadlift more than I could then when I thought I was deadlifting really heavy. But also with that injury, I realized the weak links and I could go back and address them. I didn't blame that movement. I realized that was the straw that broke the camel's back, and just the exercise that happened, the injury happened to happen on. And if I had just written it off, I would have missed out, right? But you can't avoid exercise. You need to learn how to retrain those movement patterns. And for a while, I didn't do the same variations as I built up. But I considered to myself, like, why would I consider this move bad? What could I have done that led to me even having issues with it, right? But consider why you believe something and then start to break down those beliefs. Like ask what may be needed to learn to control the movement. So, were you not using it correctly? Was your form off? Was your recruitment pattern off? Did it not meet you where you're at? Did you progress it too quickly? So think about what you might need to learn to be able to control the movement. Do you need to improve your hip hinging, right? Learn how to actually load your glutes and hamstrings to control that deadlift. Figure out the muscles that should be powering it and the movement pattern it's trying to address. So with the deadlift, you want to think about engaging your glutes, engaging your hamstrings, even engaging your lats and upper back to support that weight. You need to think about that hip hinge exercise, right? It's not a knee dominant movement, it's a hip dominant movement. Start to break these things down and see where your weak links are, even with addressing that movement pattern, and maybe even where your weaknesses are in terms of the muscles. Consider if your move is I'm still not sold on it. Consider who it would be good for and why. Argue even against yourself. Like say, hey, okay, I'm never going to do the barbell deadlift. I don't enjoy it. I don't like it. I have imbalances. So instead of saying all the reasons why you wouldn't do it, think about who it would be good for. Oh, it'd be great for someone trying to develop this type of strength, who really wants to lift heavy, who's moving heavy boxes off the ground. Maybe it is really good because it can really lead to that muscular strength of the entire posterior chain, and being able to hip hinge correctly and really drive that ground away to pull a bar up is super, important to the overall strength that they're building for everyday life, right? But then in considering who it might be good for and why, consider whom it might be bad for and why. Okay, so this person, isn't able to actually hip hinges correctly, and they don't have the mobility, right, to reach the bar, and they can't keep the bar close to their body. So maybe they could do a kettlebell setting it back between their legs, or maybe they have to do a single leg because they do have an imbalance. Start to consider all the different options in terms of, if it's bad for somebody, what could they do instead? Why would this be bad for somebody, right? Then look for modifications or variations that may make it work for you or others with specific needs and goals. So I talked about the deadlift there, right? Maybe you decide that even though you can validate that, the sumo deadlift with the barbell is great for some people really looking for that muscle hypertrophy, who are experienced with lifting, who do have to maybe pick up really heavy things off the ground, even in everyday life. Not every move has to be that functional. But then you might say, hey, for, somebody who doesn't know how to hip hinge and sit back, maybe I'm really scared to truly load my glutes and bow over. Maybe I need to start with the kettlebell so I can set the weight back between my heels because I can't keep the bar close to my shin. Or maybe I even need to do a unilateral move because I need to correct an imbalance, right? You can start to break down options in those movement variations. Just remember though, if you just avoid an exercise or write it off, you're going to be missing a lot of opportunity to strengthen potentially weak links that you actually need to strengthen to move better in everyday life. So start to assess, why am I demonizing this move? Why do I feel it's risky? What are the actual risks and rewards? And how can I better implement this fundamental movement pattern potentially for my needs and goals? I'm super excited to share my interview with Dr. Jen Hosler of Movement Upgraded. She's a physical therapist, strength coach, and mobility specialist. We're going to chat about aging well, overcoming injury, and even coming back stronger from those aches and pains, and what you can do to keep those aches and pains at bay and use training to move well in everyday life. So let's jump right in. I'm super excited to have Jen on to talk a little bit about aging well, moving functionally well until our final day on this planet, and even seeing injuries as learning opportunities. So welcome, Jen. Excited to chat.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Those are like all of my favorite topics to talk about because that's what I spend my whole week, day in, day out kind of doing. So I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. I want to pick your brain for all of our education. Let's talk about moving well as we get older, seeing injuries as opportunities. Let's just say someone gets injured, which most of us do, and they tend to accumulate more as we're getting older. What can we sort of do in terms of approaching this injury and handling it and making sure that we actually come back stronger?
Yeah, I always talk about injuries as learning opportunities for sure, because it really is a great time to kind of check in with our bodies and how we're feeling. Because not all injuries are this huge, I sprained my ankle and it was because I did this one thing. A lot of injuries are oh, it's I tweaked my back, or, oh, this doesn't feel very good. And then it starts to get worse and things like that. And so when I talk to people, it's a very perfect time to check in with all of the things that kind of are related to injuries, which are not exactly what we think. So a lot of people, when I talk to them, they're like, well, I'm trying to pinpoint this one movement that I did, this one thing. And in reality, injuries and pain are very much related to a lot of things, like our nutrition. Our sleep is actually probably one of the biggest risk factors. Our stress levels actually really can impact the pain we feel. And of course, our loads, which is like if you all of a sudden try to go in and PR your back squat and your back was not prepared for that, or your hips are not prepared, you're more likely to have an injury. And so anytime we have an injury, it's kind of like, okay, let's check in. And before we start to panic spiral, go down this worst case scenario, which is what our brains always want to do. Let's see if we can check in with our bodies and see where we're at in all of those scenarios. And so I usually tell people, let's kind of take a step back and look at that. Now, in an ideal world, I usually tell people like the best case scenario is to have somebody who knows your body that you're working well with. So if you can find and have a great relationship with a physical therapist, to check in with them and just see if there's like maybe some, I don't know if I would call them like blind spots or just like missing links in your training program that you're like, oh, I didn't realize that I need to kind of address that. My hip mobility or my spine mobility is starting to kind of diminish. And it's not something I'm working on because it's not kind of focused a lot in mainstream medicine. And they can also coach you and kind of reassure you and spend a lot of time maybe seeing things that you are not able to see. That's like what a coach does. We hold up mirrors, and physical therapy is the same thing, to be like, hey, like this is what I'm seeing. And then you're like, oh, so that's like best case scenario. But if you're not able to, or you haven't figured that out, like the other thing you can really do is just kind of check in with those situations and be like, okay, did I have an increase in my movement? Did maybe like, is my nutrition off? Where's my self-care at? And my check in with all of the ways that I take care of my body, and kind of what are the big moving blocks, and are there anything, like, is there anything that I can address for that? And then also managing those, like I said, those panic, like anxiety, fear spirals we have, because those can make our pain worse, are going to be really the big thing. And then managing your expectations. If you're going through an injury, it's like, okay, maybe I need to pull back a little bit. Maybe I just need to spend some more time, but it's really just like a great learning opportunity for you to be like, okay, where are those missing links in my taking care of myself? And the last thing I'll say about that is the way that I like to explain injuries and kind of what contributes to them is kind of like a Jenga tower. Are you familiar with the Jenga? Yeah, you're nodding your head. Okay. So Cori knows. The Jenga tower is that game of wooden blocks, and you start to pull them and you're trying not to knock the tower down. The very beginning, it's very strong and stable. It's really like you have a lot more leeway. As things get removed, our foundation is less, right? So it's more wobbly. We have to be more careful. As we get older, of course, there's like a little bit less of a stable foundation. So we have to be a little bit more careful. And then all of those other things are our foundation. So the nutrition, the sleep, the stress, the making sure we are strength training and building the capacity, but managing those loads and not spiking them too quickly. All of those are like our recovery, and those are the foundation. And if there are any missing blocks or things that you can address, you're more likely to have an injury. And a lot of times we want to be like, oh, I sneezed wrong, or I did this weird thing wrong, and the whole Jenga tower came down. But maybe that sneeze was just like the final blow to like shift it all. And that is not that you sneezed wrong. It's just that all those foundational things were missing. And so that's like my best analogy that I like to use to explain that for people.
I think that's a perfect description. It really is often the straw that broke the camel's back. We've sort of ignored other things that have been adding up over time that have been weakening our foundation. And then all of a sudden we blame the last thing we did. We blame that deadlift. We blame that squat. We blame that push-up, right? You hear that so often. Oh, this move did this to me. Well, yes, but... And so if you do encounter somebody that comes into you with like, oh, I hurt myself doing a deadlift, how do you handle that? Because I think it's really key that we address the fact that, okay, it wasn't just this move, it was the overload. So let's break down what caused the overload, but then also getting us over the fear of the exercise that was the thing we do sort of have that connection and association with the pain with.
Yeah, that's like huge. And I feel like a lot of times in the rehab process too, these types of things are missing. So addressing the fear and then getting you back to be kind of stronger than you were before, because clearly there was something missing in the very beginning that contributed to the injury. And so once you've had an injury, we get a little bit more fearful. And I keep using the word fear and anxious, but like pain is very multifactorial. And I guess I have said that. And so like fear actually contributes to a perception of threat is what I call it. And if you're afraid or fearful, or even have those thoughts in your brain's always listening subconsciously, it can make our nervous system like more sensitive. And so we're more likely to feel pain, because pain is just a sign from our body that something needs to change. And so this is where a lot of rehab kind of like misses the boat and that doesn't get people back into those things and then have them retrain it, because that's actually really important. And we always want to go back and retrain the places that we got injured in, whether it was a deadlift, whether it was a squat or whatever. And when I first start to work with somebody and they're very afraid of deadlifts, for example, because that was like where they hurt their back, we always talk about how a deadlift is a loaded position that you're going to do in your daily life. And we always want to be able to do some version of a deadlift, and avoiding them for the rest of your life is actually going to create more of an issue than not, because it's building your strength capacity, which is how much your tissues, like your muscles and tendons and ligaments, how much they can tolerate. And injuries are very much a recipe of there was too much load and the tissue was not prepared for it. When we strength train or when we exercise, we're loading our body a little bit. We're creating a little breakdown of our body. And then our body is like, oh, you want to be better at that because I failed at it, or it was like really stressful for my body. I'm going to build adaptations and make us stronger so that when I come back to it, like it'll be easier for me. That's like exercise science 101. And so when we're strength training, we're doing that. And so if we are not doing that, we start to get weaker with age, and that actually makes us more susceptible to injuries. So it's not the load, it's not the movement ever. It's just that your body wasn't prepared for it. And why goes back to, we have to figure out where those missing links in the Jenga tower was. For a lot of people in deadlifts or things like that, where they hurt their back, we talk a lot about it, but I'm very big on this on my platform, is that we actually need to train our spines. There's like an old like pseudoscience of like, your spine doesn't adapt or it's not strong and we need to live in neutral spine. But reality is our spine doesn't live by this special set of rules. And so we always are looking for these like little missing like weak links in our training that can address it. But the most important thing is to know that a squat or a deadlift are things you're doing in your daily life. So you might avoid them in the gym, but you'll never be able to avoid them in your life. And eventually you become weaker. And the squat or deadlift that you do, which is just sitting down to the chair or the toilet or bending over to pick up your shoe or the dog food, then becomes your PR. And we never want to be PRing in our daily life. That is a recipe for injury. And so usually what we like to do in strength training is build you margins of error. So your daily life is less than what you're doing in the gym. It's controlled chaos. And so, like you said, injuries are not entirely avoidable. We can't prevent them. But they happen to everybody. And so when they do, it's like a great learning opportunity. And we always want to get back into those things because it's too important to lift weights and to load those patterns than to avoid them. Like there's just too much risk in avoiding strength training as we age. Like there just is. That's like the bottom line. And so it's not that you need to avoid it. So we need to find you a way to get you back into it that's not painful, and then make sure we're kind of addressing some of the issues that might have contributed to it. And especially mindset. Like if you're really afraid of it, like I think a lot of people don't realize in physical therapy that a lot of our sessions are a lot of talking, very much up front, because we really have to address those thoughts and the conversations and fears that we aren't always aware of, because they affect our thoughts are nerve impulses. They affect how we feel and whether our bodies are prepared. So if you ever go through an injury, the most important thing you do is like not let that load or that movement become something you're afraid to do, and always find either somebody that can work with you or yourself. Try to work back into it in a way that feels comfortable for you, because long term down the road, you're at more risk for an injury later if you avoid loads.
Yes, it's not avoidance. It's not demonization of movements. It is breaking things down, seeing the gym as the opportunity to build back stronger and really control those movements. Because I think so often people don't realize too, there's a difference between form and recruitment. And they don't empower themselves to think about what's actually working as they're doing the movements. They're just trying to go faster, work harder, get through the workouts, instead of really seeing training sessions for the value that they are. They think, oh, I'm going to burn more calories, but it's like, no, this is the time to learn to move well, so that as you get older, you aren't PRing in everyday life trying to pick up dog food, right? You're not afraid of those heavy loads, which is also something I wanted to touch on, because I know you're really big on lifting, not being afraid of weights as we get older. I know that's another thing. Not only do we worry about injuries as we get older, but we start to think, oh goodness, like I can't lift over X amount. I can't do this move and I can't lift over X amount. What would you say to somebody who's getting older and saying, oh, I can't lift as heavy?
I always ask more questions before I really say anything. So that's kind of like something that I've learned over the years. I can't give advice until I get an idea of where that's coming from. So I always challenge it though, because the reality is our body never stops adapting. Like that's the bottom line till the day we die. That is one of the like key components of living is your body, once it's challenged, like gets better with challenge. Now, the challenge can't be too much or that actually breaks us down, which is the beauty of the gym and why injuries still happen, because there's no perfect way of loading all of this because there's so many factors. But if somebody is really like afraid of lifting or they think that, then I ask them like, what's going on? Is that because it's something you've been told? And could we potentially get curious about that and maybe consider like that as not this Bible thing that we have to like for sure 100% take as true? Or is that because that's some thought you formulated because of the people you've been around? So is the environment that you've never really seen anybody who's older lift weights, and perhaps that might be true, but we should maybe get curious about why that is and all of those things. And I'm very into challenging some of the like myths around aging and exercise, because the one thing we do know about aging is that exercise is one of the most potent ways to mitigate some of the effects of aging that keeps us not able to do the things that we want when we start to age, and strength training especially is like one of those. And I have I haven't seen her in a while because she had to take a break, but I have a 90-year-old client who I got into strength training. And the only thing she tells me is that she wishes she started earlier. And that's always something that I'll tell people. Like she's 90 and she has no idea how much time she has left. And she's like, but I still want to be able to do certain things. And I know that if I don't challenge myself, then my body will not be able to do those things. And that's kind of as simple as that. So when people always ask me about that or say those things, I'm always like, let's kind of get curious about that and see where that's coming from. And could we potentially move into an open mind about maybe that isn't true, and maybe we could challenge that. And if I get a little bit of that like open opportunity, that I'm like, let's just see what do we really have to lose? And I always come back to the risk versus benefit of everything, right? So the risk of lifting, as you can get injured in the lift, right? The benefit of lifting is like a whole myriad of things, especially for women as we age, because our bone density is like one of the biggest things, along with all of the other beautiful things that come with lifting. But the risk of not lifting is so significant that it kind of cancels out the risk of anything else, any small injury happening. Your injuries are going to be skyrocketed if you avoid lifting and strength training and loading your body. Now, I'm not saying you need to back squat like 400 pounds, right? There's like a fine line to that. And we can always find ways to keep our bodies loaded, but it does mean that we should consider that some of the things that we've been told about aging is not necessarily the truth or even supported in any sort of evidence.
It's so true. We just sometimes accept things as like, this is right, this is wrong, right? We don't actually question why we believe it. And the more we can dive into questioning ourselves on our beliefs, the more we can be open to new things and new perspectives that might help us even at different stages of our life, right? Because nothing works forever in one way. And you really even touched on it. It's not just about squatting 400 pounds. It's about the fact that if you challenge yourself, you're going to create that change. You're going to adapt and grow stronger. And you're going to use the gym where, yes, there's risk involved, but with risk comes reward, right? But we're going to be able to train ourselves to be able to take on any challenges we want, even as we get older in everyday life, which, let's face it, I want to hike and bike and kayak and go on a vacation and do whatever I want without any worry about what I'm doing. In terms of somebody just starting out, they're trying to, really get back into training. They're maybe a little bit unsure of how to get started with their mobility work. What would you recommend that they do? And I know you're a big advocate of the controlled articular rotations. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. Like I always go for low hanging fruit. So like, what's the bare minimum that we can do that's like not super complicated and like it takes like a little bit of time and can be tacked on, done anywhere. It's not a bunch of equipment, like low cognitive load, all of those types of things. And CARS, which is controlled articular rotations, which is what you just brought up, is that for our joints. So the way that I like to explain that is like we brush and floss our teeth every single day. We're really good at that. Dentists have done a great job at reinforcing that. We learn as children.
Some people are really good about it every single day, but
maybe not the flossing part, but at least the brushing part, I hope most people are better at. But I know there's probably people who don't brush their teeth. But I'm sure most people listening to this who are into fitness, generally there's like a correlation there that we have good personal hygiene. But we're good at knowing at least that is necessary to kind of keep our teeth healthy, remove some of the plaque and buildup. When it comes to our joints, like our hip, our spine, our knee, like all of those things, we have not been taught any of that. And exercise in general does help. But most exercises and most things we do in the gym are not getting our joints through every single range of motion. That's not their goal, right? That's what cars do. They just are taking every one of your joints from head to toe, your neck, your shoulders, your wrists, your elbows, through the full range of motion that they have possible, which ends up looking kind of like circles, but they're controlled. That's the C. Articular stands for a joint where two bones articulate or come together, and then rotation. Because if you actually were to Google what a joint looks like, there's they're round. And so like when we're trying to move and get some of the joints to move and then some of the other side of the joint to open, that's how we get nutrients in and out, because we actually don't have good blood supply to most of our joint spaces. The blood goes right around it. And then when we move, it gets the nutrients from the blood into our joints. So if you're taking like chondroitin or any of those collagen supplements, it's actually not going to get into your joint unless you can move that part of your joint. And movement is like the point of our joints. Like otherwise there would not be a joint there. And so to keep them healthy and get that stuff in there, we have to move through all of the range of motion. And then that also helps to flush some of the stuff out and keep all of the other tissues we don't think about, like our ligaments and tendons and cartilage. It keeps them healthy. And so cars doing this like routine, I call it like a mobility or movement routine every day, is like the simplest way to just get started in taking care of your joints. And it's a perfect way to check in with your body. How am I feeling? How's my recovery? Is this a little achy? And then we can be like, I have people pair it either in the morning with like coffee, or is it like a morning routine, or I'll have them also do it as a warm up, because it's a perfect time to check in and you're hitting head to toe body and it's movement. So it gets you ready. And then maybe like some air squats or whatever you're doing to warm up. But it's a great way to check in with your body, because then we can adjust and be like, oh, I'm actually not that recovered, or my back feels a little tweaky. And it's just like a great way to start introducing movements that we don't typically. So if anybody, if you've never heard of that, that's kind of what it is. And if you haven't started working on joint mobility or taking care of your joints, it's like the low-hanging fruit. It's a maintenance mode of kind of maintaining your range of motion and keeping your health of your joints up as much as you can. We can't always reverse things that much, but we definitely can mitigate the loss in the future.
And we can always move forward from where we're at using these things. And I think you even highlighted something that's super key. We often think about a recovery day, right? Even a rest day, but we don't think about movement as recovery, or even the fact that by doing little bursts of it, so even just little things as part of our warm up, not only is that beneficial in and of itself, but it can actually help us optimize our training session, because we're aware of our body and space. We're able to actually strengthen through the full range of motion to maintain that range of motion. We're able to utilize muscles more efficiently, and part of strength is that neuromuscular efficiency. So it's thinking about like almost the minimum effective dose at times that we can do of things to actually improve and move forward. And so if someone were to do this, how often or how long do you actually have them do a routine? What are some common areas that you'll have them target?
My goal for most people is we're going to get them in a full body routine. It takes 10 minutes, 5 minutes if you do an express version. In an ideal situation, we would want to do like 3 to 5 reps at each joint. But really, if I had my way as a physical therapist, which means I'm extremely biased, everybody would wake up, do cars, go to work, get there, do more cars, eat lunch, do more cars. It's just really good low intensity movement that it's hard to overdo. So that is like my bare minimum. So like 2 to 3 reps, 3 to 5 reps, usually for maintenance. If you have like a sticky area that's like a struggle, then I usually will say like, you can have higher rep days where you do these as training, like recovery training type of movements. And you can do upwards of like 10 reps at a time, which feel amazing. They're one of my favorite like down regulating things to do. But like you said, they're also really great for motor control and body awareness, which most people, when they come in and I'm assessing them and I'm working with them, I'm like, hey, Tom, like you've been together your whole life with your shoulder. but you've never really met it because I'm asking you to move your shoulder and your spine is doing all of the work. And so this is how we get your shoulder to work like a shoulder and your spine to work like a spine. Because as long as you don't have good control and awareness of your shoulder, every shoulder exercise will also be a spine exercise. That's not a problem unless your spine isn't prepared to handle that. And nobody likes doing somebody else's work in a team situation. That's just we're not happy about that, right? So that is why I love cars so much. And a lot of times when I have people start, they're like, oh my gosh, I like, when's the last time you like tried to move your back or even knew what that felt like? For most people, it's like foreign, except it's your own body. And so it's like one of the, again, like baseline things of like getting that awareness and control of your body. And the more awareness and control you have of each joint individually, the more they play nicer in your big exercises.
Yeah, the more efficiently you move. And so often as we get older, we think about, maintaining our strength, but it's also that reaction time. And some of this allows you to react more efficiently because you're able to recruit the correct muscles at the correct times to the correct extents and have proper mobility of those joints so that you don't slip on ice or you can catch yourself when you're going to fall and you don't have those fractures and other injuries. So people need to get started on this right away. It's never too late to start. It's never too late to make a change.
Yeah, the best time was yesterday, but the next best time is definitely today. Like I always tell people, and you don't have to be perfect with it. It's not another thing that it's like, oh no, like I skipped my cars today, like all is lost, whatever. It's just like do what you can and you can do them all together. You can do them in the morning. You can break them up. There are days when I'm really busy and I will just be doing my wrist cars while I'm in the middle of a session with a patient, or I will do my neck cars when I'm like in between or like right after I peed real quick. It's just like a quick way. That's why I love them because they're so easy to start implementing. And I have clients who are like, yeah, I go to the bathroom and take a break. I take a cars break now in the bathroom because it feels so good because I'm stuck at a desk all day. And I'm like, that's great. And it also is nice because once you learn the movements, the concept is like cars, I give people like a basic routine to kind of know, but you can do them in different positions and it challenges your body slightly different. So there's a lot of options, which means if you get bored of doing the same things over and over, you're going to still apply the same principle of move your shoulder in its full range of motion, but maybe you'll do it in a slightly different position, which novelties are always great. But once you know like the routine, it's like a tool you have now. And that's amazing because a lot of people have chronic tightness, chronic issues, like a lot of that. And while we're stuck stretching or trying to find all of these like complicated answers, sometimes literally just doing cars is like my top tier exercise for most issues because it gets blood flow to the area. It actually decreases some of the fibrotic tissue. It can increase your body awareness. It actually decreases our pain sensitivity, which is really helpful if you're somebody who has pain a lot. It decreases tightness. Like there's so many cool things that happen. And just having that like simple tool it's honestly like just knowing you can have some effect on how you feel when things are kind of awry is helpful. The other thing I love about cars is they're a little self-assessment tool. There is a concept in movement called a closing angle and an opening angle. So if you tilt your right ear towards your right shoulder, you will see that there is like an angle that's your neck moving. The angle between your neck and your shoulder on the right side is closing and the angle on the left side is opening. If we feel something on that right side pinching or coming together, that is a sign that your joint needs some attention. That is a sign that your neck, you need some neck work. Maybe you don't have any injuries yet, but it is a sign that there could be something in the future. And I'm all about trying to get things started earlier. And so that's one of the reasons I love cars because then I teach people, okay, and I talk about this all the time. Okay, when you're going through, now screen for your body, see how it feels, and also look for these closing angle symptoms. If you feel a pinch, it means your joint has lost some joint space and we're kind of coming together too closely. And that means we need to address that. And that takes more mobility work, but at least you have the baseline beginning of cars, which is your body awareness. And if you do feel that in cars, the only thing I tell you is to make your cars smaller. We never want to push through that. You're only allowed to feel that sensation the first rep. And then after that, you have to make it as small as you can to avoid it. And that's where we go from there. But they're also like a really cool assessment tool.
I love that because you can be preventative instead of reactive to something and make sure that you're actually addressing what's going on, not to mention using movement as medicine. So if someone wanted to get started with cars, where can they find you, Jen, and share all of your information? Because I know everybody's going to be wanting to improve their mobility and get started with little morning routines and even adding this into their warm up.
Yeah, I'm really active on Instagram for right now. And I believe if you go to my profile a while back when COVID happened and all of that, I did a live car session. And so if you want to go through that, it is free and you can find it through my cars like highlight link. But if you just want the guide, I have a cars guide. I think it's $25 if I remember correctly. But it's linked in my bio and it goes through and it links every video. So it breaks down all of them. And then you also get follow along routines that you can just follow along and then kind of learn some of where are the closing angle sensations so you can learn about your body. And so that's where you can go if you want to get started on cars. If you really want to get started on your mobility, I'm doing a Kickstart Your Mobility training like masterclass in, I don't know when this is launching, but it's on March 30th at 7. Anyways, if you can't make it, but you're interested, you can always sign up. I'm going to be sending it out to everybody. But that's for my like mobility membership where I have a bunch of classes and programs that you can follow broken up by body part. So if you're like, okay, I like learning about myself, or I like learning on my own and I'm really kind of self-motivated and I just like to follow along classes and kind of go through that is an option. And then I also work with people virtually. So I have one-on-one coaching options. So all of those are linked in my bio. And then I also have a podcast where I dive a lot more in depth in all of these conversations that we've had today. So that is called the Movement Upgraded Podcast. And if you want to check that out, there's tons of good free content on there too.
Well, this has been super helpful, and I will make sure to link out to all that in the show notes and the video description on YouTube, just so you guys can check that out, because I want you to get moving and not have any excuse to move well to your final day on this planet. Thank you so much, Jen, for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much.
I want to talk about recovery and mobility and overall health from a nutritional standpoint, and not just the mobility work we need to do in the gym. So I wanted to share with you 8 vitamins and minerals that you can include in your nutrition, or that you should focus on with your nutrition to get better results in terms of muscle growth and recovery. So while we're talking about supplements, if we're talking about a dietary focus, I would say put the emphasis on protein if we're going on a macro perspective. And in terms of supplements in general, protein and collagen are probably at the top of what you should be including for recovery and maintaining your mobility and overall health. Especially if you've been out with aches and pains, collagen might be a supplement you want to look into. But I did want to go over 8 vitamins and minerals that can aid in better gains from your workouts and even help you improve your recovery to move and feel your best. So one other tip before I dive into the different vitamins and minerals that I did want to include is that as we get older, omega-3s might also be something we want to include. They have been shown to increase muscle growth in older adults, and the anti-inflammatory properties can help relieve muscle soreness. So it might want to be something to consider, especially as you enter that perimenopausal and menopausal stage of life. Okay, but jumping into those vitamins and minerals, the first one I want to talk about is vitamin C. So vitamin C is important for muscle health as it acts as an antioxidant and it helps protect your muscles from damage caused due to oxidative stress. So vitamin C can also play a very important role in the formation of collagen. So if you are taking a collagen supplement and want to make sure it really benefits you, consider also including vitamin C, okay? A quick thing about collagen as well is it's an important structural protein that is found in your skin, muscle, bones, and tendons, and a lack of vitamin C automatically reduces the production of collagen. This can lead to poor muscle health, among other things. So definitely think if you are even including collagen that you're getting your vitamin C. Vitamin C also supports protein metabolism, which is key for muscle growth, and it can help reduce overall muscle soreness. So vitamin C is number 1. Number 2, I want to talk about vitamin E. So vitamin E is critical for building strong muscles. It plays a vital role in repairing the plasma membrane of cells. This is particularly essential for muscle cells. The plasma membrane of these cells tears more frequently. That's what we're doing when we're working out. We're tearing it down. So if the membrane is not repaired, it can result in the cell death. This can lead to muscle wasting disease, and a lack of vitamin E can also lead to reduced muscle strength and frailty. So it plays an important role in combating that oxidative stress as well. So if we want strong muscles, we also want to include vitamin E. Next, we have vitamin D, which a lot of us are like, oh, yay, one that probably a lot of us are taking already. But vitamin D is essential for your muscles to function normally. Vitamin D deficiency leads to proximal weakness and reduction in muscle mass. One study actually linked vitamin D adequacy even with stronger muscles and better posture. So vitamin D is essential for testosterone production, which is also a hormone that helps us build and maintain lean muscle. So not only does it help with hormone levels, but it does even potentially help with better posture from better muscle strength. Now, vitamin A. So the body requires this vitamin for protein synthesis, which is key for increasing muscle mass. Vitamin A also helps in the production of testosterone, again, that muscle building hormone. And vitamin A plays an important role in providing structural strength to your muscles. It does this by helping cells to reach maturity at a faster rate. It's also essential for bone growth and development and fights inflammation. The extra bonus of it is that it also supports collagen formation to not only optimize your collagen supplementation, but even keep those tissues healthy. So along with vitamin C, it's very important to get vitamin A if you are taking that collagen supplement and want to see the best benefits from it. I then want to talk about vitamin B12 and B9. So these two vitamins work really well together. Both vitamin B12 and B9 really complement. B12 helps your body produce red blood cells, which are responsible for delivering oxygen to your muscles. This action makes B12 a key player in muscle growth. It's also a key player in muscle recovery, along with folate or B9, which I'll touch on in a second. B12 is vital for nervous system functioning, and it helps make sure that your muscles contract when they need to. So if you want that neuromuscular efficiency, we also have to address that from not only the mind-body connection or workouts, but also from a nutritional standpoint. Vitamin B9 or folate or folic acid is also key for muscle growth, and these two work very closely together. Energy production and the building and repair of muscle tissue by physical activity require both folate and vitamin B12 as cofactors to work together. What this means is that you need both, okay? It helps you make sure, along with other B vitamins, that you're getting your muscles the nutrients they need, and this improves muscle growth, a synthesis of new cells, and the repair of damaged cells and tissues. So the last two that I really want to touch on are zinc and iron. So these minerals are super important. Research suggests that zinc plays a role in post-exercise skeletal muscle regeneration. Basically, it helps repair muscle fibers after a hard lifting session. So especially as we get older and our body isn't recovering as quickly, it's even more essential that we focus on some of these micronutrients. Your body really also needs iron to thrive. It makes hemoglobin, which shuttles oxygen from your lungs to the rest of your body, and it plays an important role in energy metabolism. Poor iron status can stunt your body's capacity to carry and deliver oxygen, which can actually negatively impact your VO2 max or your work capacity. Oxygen gives you the ability to push harder and exercise at a higher level. So we really want it to be efficient, right, in terms of the transport. Improving low levels of iron can help resolve unexplained fatigue as well as lack of energy, and even a reduction that you might be seeing in terms of your performance. So pair your iron-rich foods with vitamin C to enhance absorption as well. Again, making it really key that we get all these range of 8 vitamins and minerals to make sure that we're seeing the best results as fast as possible. So while you can get all these from your diet, and we always want to focus on whole natural foods first to not only hit our macros, but often by dialing in our macros, we see an improvement in our micronutrient intake. It can be hard to make sure that we're getting adequate amounts and even potentially more than just the minimum to see the best results, especially as we get older. And this is where supplements can assist. If you are struggling with your micronutrient intake, I have to say that I do have great success, including greens in my immunity with my clients. Both of these things bump all 8 of these vitamins and minerals so that they can really help. I like putting the greens in oatmeal, just a little tip if you do have your greens. And I also like drinking the immunity with water. As someone who's not very good about drinking water, it really helps me make sure that I'm getting enough. So make sure that you are getting all 8 of these vitamins and minerals to really help improve your muscle growth and recovery so that you can see the best results from all of the hard training sessions that you're doing. I want to share one of my favorite ways to make sure that your form and your recruitment patterns are correct. If you are listening to this, I do a demonstration of how to do this technique and even why it's helpful, so check out the YouTube video for that. So if you're trying to get proper form, I know a lot of us turn to the mirrors at gyms. I actually really dislike mirrors in gyms. And it's not because I necessarily have a problem with seeing myself in the mirror, although that's always a little awkward when you look like a giant rat. But I don't like mirrors because I think it makes us focus externally instead of focusing internally. And so much of what we get out of an exercise is what muscles we actually feel working. So while yes, form is a way to get the proper recruitment patterns and form keeps us safe, we can actually get injured because we're mimicking proper form. You're looking in the mirror and you're thinking, oh, I accidentally shift. Okay, I need to shift back. And then you end up compensating and overusing muscles or seeking out mobility from other joints. So it's really key you have that internal cueing as you also make sure that your form is correct. So I don't like the mirrors because I think they make us focus externally instead of on what we feel working. So what do I like to do with clients? Well, I like to have them video, and I actually use this tool myself. So if you're thinking, well, I'm not all into those selfies and everything else, I'm going to show you my really easy way to film because I don't have any fancy equipment when I'm filming myself in the gym. Now, in terms of filming, you want to film when you have a new move. If you've had an injury with an exercise, you want to film. If you're adding loads, trying a new variation, any of these reasons why you might be questioning, am I feeling the right things working? Am I actually replicating the movement correctly? You want to film. So every movement can be an assessment. Every repetition can be an assessment. I can tell you that I will pause during my workouts, even if it means extending my rest periods, to sometimes film as I increase loads on squats or a new version of squats or lunges or any of those things. So you have your handy dandy phone. It's not just for going on Instagram when you're at the gym, right? During those rest periods, you can press on the camera, you can go to the video, you do the little turnaround guy, okay? And then you can press record and you can put it down on your water bottle if you need to, or you can put it down on, the roller or a bench or whatever you have. And then because it's turned around, I can move out here and be like, okay, I'm working on my hip hinge. Am I actually hinging correctly? And then I don't necessarily have to look at it. I can instead focus internally and be like, all right, pushing my butt back, feeling my hamstrings load, feeling my glutes load, driving my hips forward. Okay, pushing my butt back, driving my hips forward. And then I can focus on what I feel working. And then I have that visual to say, hey, okay, what did I do in there to see if it actually matched up? Was I ending up leaning forward? Is that why I started to feel my lower back? Was my form in line with my recruitment patterns? Not to mention, I can then use this to take different angles. So let's just say, hey, I'm wondering if I'm shifting because I'm feeling one hamstring more. I can change this and be like, all right, let's go to a different angle. I need to take from back here now. So I set it up there and then I can line up, and sometimes you got to do the butt shot and you can actually be like, okay, am I in line? Nope. Okay, then do it. And yep, it's going to be a straight on butt shot, but I can then watch, am I actually getting the angles I need to see my form? And then what do I feel working? So as awkward as it can be to film yourself in the gym and get, butt shots, whatever else, it allows you to truly review. And then as you learn to cue yourself, you might even notice with the lunge, hey, with the lunge, I want to have that vertical shin angle. You can use that to reference. And then as you're doing the lunge, you can say, okay, am I loading my glute? What do I feel working? And then compare. And if you're like, okay, I started to feel my knee, did I start to compensate as I fatigued, right? It's that external feedback as you keep that internal focus. It helps us be so much more intentional and get so much out of our workouts. So don't feel weird doing a little selfie at the gym. Turn on that camera, really get that external feedback to make sure your movement pattern is correct as you can focus internally on what you actually feel working to make sure that everything's lining up so you're getting the most out of everything you include. So I want to talk about imbalances, what they are, how you can address them, and why they might even be worse than inflexibility. If you are listening, make sure to check out the YouTube because I will go over a few different tips with it, and the visuals often help, especially if you're like me. But going into imbalances. So what is an imbalance? An imbalance can be something between both sides where you might find you have a stronger side and a weaker side. Sometimes you can even see differences in muscles, right? One side is a little bit bigger than the other. We're never going to be perfectly balanced. I do want to throw that out there really early on. You're never going to be perfectly balanced. So there's always going to be an imbalance unless you really are ambidextrous and you use both hands completely evenly throughout the day, both legs, okay? So while we have to realize we are not perfectly symmetrical, we do want to note any imbalances we have, and not only between sides, okay? A lot of times we think my right side is stronger than my left side, which can be the case, but we also want to consider imbalances between muscles. Is my posterior chain, so my backside, a lot stronger than my front side? Because these things can lead to us compensating during movements. And the reason imbalances can be worse than inflexibility is because if you're actually evenly inflexible, like let's just say you can't touch your toes on both sides with your hamstrings, which is a whole other subject about whether or not that's even important. But if you can't touch your toes on both sides, you're not going to necessarily have an issue with differences in your hip mobility or even potentially glute activation on each side. However, if you're really flexible on one side and not so flexible on the other, and then you go to do a bilateral movement, so if you're like, wow, I can't touch my toes on this side, but I can on this side, and then you go do a squat or even doing a glute bridge, right? If all of a sudden there's this big difference in your mobility, you're going to end up overloading that other side or seeking out mobility from the side that has more. And that compensation is what can lead to injury and overload so often, okay? So you want to make sure that you're addressing imbalances not only between your right and left side, but even between muscles around a joint, because weakness and overactivity can create issues, okay? So in addressing imbalances, it's always coming back to that 3-part prehab process. And as you're doing that, we don't want to just avoid movements as much as possible. We want to retrain them. And so as you're doing the 3-part prehab process of foam rolling, stretching, and activation, so you're foam rolling over active muscles that might be tight, restricting others from engaging the way they should around a joint, or even foam rolling on one side because the muscle's overactive and you feel yourself compensating in that 2-legged squat, right? And then stretching to mobilize the joints, improve the length-tension relationship of the muscles so you're more flexible, and then activating to get those underactive muscles activated. And again, prehab might be really imbalanced. You might foam roll on one side and have to activate on another, or only do a whole bunch of things on one side, which can feel awkward, but it really is helpful. But then in your workouts, if you know you compensate between left and right side, like your right side's stronger, you're always compensating, try not to do bilateral movements. Include a lot more unilateral exercises. It's going to be very helpful. And when we're talking about unilateral exercises, if you're like, well, I can't do a single leg glute bridge. When I'm doing it, it's like, meh, and I'm not lifting up, right? Think about that 80-20. Keep that right heel still down, right, when you're doing that glute bridge, because this gives you 80% of the focus on that leg, so it adds a little assist. You can actually feel the correct muscles working. If you're doing a single leg deadlift, try a bench supported one, but consider variations that allow you to isolate each side independently while not necessarily being as hard as the full unilateral exercise, okay? So there's lots of different options with that 80-20 balance, which I've gone over in the past. But then in terms of your prehab, right, if something's tight and you have a restriction on one side, maybe you're only rolling out your TFL on one side because that's the only issue. While you could do the other side, don't be afraid to just be like, all right, relaxing this side, okay? And then I know my glute medius on this side doesn't work as well, so maybe I'm gonna do just a clam for that. So then I'll turn over, do the clam for this, focusing on this side, making sure I get the right muscle working. And maybe I have done like a hip mobility exercise, either circles, or even if I know that I really struggle with that hip extension, stretching on that side. But I might do everything just on one side or address each side independently. But you have to realize that sometimes you can't make it completely even, as much as that might hurt some of our OCD when we are addressing those imbalances, okay? So just to make sure I didn't miss anything for you guys, going back through it, an imbalance can be not only one side is weaker than the other, but muscles at the same joints, anterior, posterior, so front side and back side of our body can both have different strength discrepancies, and that can lead to injury and overload. So we want to address all these different things. And then when we are addressing them, we want to focus on the areas on each side that actually need to be addressed. If one side is weaker, you need to address it. And in terms of our strength work, I did mention that you need to do sometimes unilateral moves, but sometimes you actually have to do more reps on the weaker side to bring it up, okay? So in terms of bringing up one side, holding back one side, people often ask you like, what do I do? Do I do more reps? Do I do the same amount of weight? How do I push it, okay? So there's a combination of things you need to do. Sometimes you need to hold back that stronger side, okay? Which means that you have to do only the loads that you can actually handle on that weaker side. And then sometimes you have to do another round on that weaker side to start to bring it up, right? Again, it feels really awkward. I know we like to do even on each side, but sometimes you have to do more reps on that weaker side with a lighter load and hold back that stronger side. However, there are times where we can actually do the weight with proper form on that weaker side. However, we can't do as many reps. And this is where rest pause technique can be very, very valuable. So say you can do 8 reps of that, single leg deadlift on that right side, and you can only do 4 with the same weight on the left side. So do your 4, pause for 15 to 30 seconds, and then complete the reps. This way you're bringing that weaker side up to that stronger side, because the very short amount of rest doesn't allow your body to fully recover, repair. And so it feels like it's almost doing it in a row. You're kind of tricking it, so to speak. So then you're bringing that weaker side up. So there's a lot of different ways, whether it's holding back the stronger side because the weaker side can't handle the same loads, and then even doing that extra round, or forcing out those reps with that little rest pause technique to match it to the stronger side, okay? But remember, you're starting with that imbalance prehab after you've decided where the imbalances are, and then including the unilateral focus work as much as possible and bringing that weaker side up with either the rest pause technique or doing the extra rounds. But please address those imbalances. Don't just ignore them, and even use the technique I mentioned before with videoing to see if you are shifting in squats or other bilateral movements to be able to address any areas that you need. Well, that's a wrap for this episode of the Fitness Hacks podcast. I'd love to hear your biggest takeaways from the episode. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, please leave a review.